Good morning, everyone. First of all, very sorry to make you all wait for a couple of minutes. We had some internet connectivity issues, so now that is fixed. Well, a very warm welcome to all of you. Myself, Namrita, Director of EXIN India. I'm sure many would already know EXIN, but to give you a short brief to who we are, EXIN was originally established in 1984 as a foundation by the Ministry of Economic Affairs in the Netherlands. In the past 3 decades, EXIN has gone on to create a number of IT standards. The most notable of these include ITIL and Prince2. Currently, EXIN focuses on responding to market trends with certifications such as DevOps, Agile Scrum, SIAM, information security, SIAM, blockchain, AI, and many more. Today with us, we have a growing partner, Consuldesk, having its presence in Canada and India. Mr. Alan, founder of Consuldesk, has been kind to join us in this session as well. Moving forward with the slide, today the key takeaways would be how service management is evolving, modern business in SIAM, your role as a service management professional in customer journeys, role of SIAM in this journey. Frameworks confuse, do they? With that, I would like to introduce our speaker and presenter, Mr. Rakesh Kumar. He is an author for SIAM and ITSM. With 15 years of experience, he is a digital transformation professional. He also has a background in architecture and design of next generation technology governance. He has led teams of consultants in designing and deploying integrated automation, SIAM processes, governance models, continual service improvement initiatives, and corresponding technologies for various clients across the globe. Before we move forward, I would like to mention that please feel free to type your questions as you think across, but we will pick it up in the end. With that said, I would like to welcome our speaker, Mr. Rakesh, to start the presentation. Over to you, Rakesh.
Hey, thank you, Namrata. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Uh,
Yes.
Wonderful. Welcome everyone. Welcome on this small session on service integration and management. My name is Rakesh, and I'll be taking you through some of the key areas which we as SIAM professionals or we as service management professionals look at day in day out, and we also would be touching upon where exactly SIAM fits in the overall scheme of things when we think about services for our customers, services being a business, and how we can utilize SIAM as an overarching model to ensure that everything else falls in line and delivers the services. Now, I hope uh, we all are who the audiences are versed with SIAM, service integration and management. It's a framework for making services possible for business in a more integrated way. It's not just IT services, it's not just technology, it's beyond that, and that's where we would explore this. That's what we'll explore further in our discussion today. Now, to start with, I've put a statement in front of the screen which says Gartner provides Magic Quadrant for more than 500 critical capabilities. Now, what does this mean? If you've got a chance to see golden Magic Quadrant for respective service areas, you'll see there are a number of suppliers for a particular service area, and they compete with each other to be on the top. Now, for any business to be a business in a niche area, they would be utilizing and if we say there are 500 of such services, then we the fact that there could be flyers for a particular business to run. Now, I'm not saying that all of them get used for a business, but that also means that not one supplier can provide all the services. If that happens, so let's say if one supplier can provide all these IT services or technology services required for a business, then that one supplier would very well start doing that business, right? So it's the capabilities that technology brings. Every business uses them, and it depends on a large number of suppliers. And the magic quadrants are a very good depiction of the same. Now, why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because SIAM is that layer that helps business realize the potential of all these technologies that are underlying, that are being used for running that business. SIAM is a framework that would help fetch the best out of these technologies, these suppliers, these services, and make the business more successful. And that's where we'll delve further into our discussion. Now, sorry, I'm just trying to move the slide. Yeah, okay. So what do we understand? Um, we understand as professionals that where does service management apply? The service management applies to uh, areas where we require services to be managed by maybe a vendor, a supplier, or there are services which are provided by one supplier or multiple supplier. Now, I'm not talking about IT services alone here. Service management is a wider concept. It applies to a large number of areas. But when being an IT service provider, or being in IT services area, the concept is slightly more confined to technology. So what is our role in a business as an IT service provider? So when we get into a business as an IT service provider, or we utilize an IT service provider being a business, the expectation is that we bring the enablement for what is required by business processes. So business processes could be like insurance business process, or fulfilling some retail chain. That could be a business process. Now, IT service providers role is to make sure that that business process runs wonderfully with technology enablement. Now, is that business process management or business service management equivalent to IT service management? That's something that's intriguing us for quite some time now. We know that most of the businesses are getting enabled by technology, which means that from fulfilling those business processes to actually getting the business done, we are using technology in every space. So in a way, most of the businesses, or most of the modern businesses, they are typically IT enabled businesses. There would be there are some conventional businesses that still run the conventional way, and they are using technology partially, but most of the businesses are heading towards utilizing IT as the core enabler for all the business services. And that's where the difference between a IT service provider and a business service provider is diminishing. In other words, we can say that IT services make the most of the business, and these businesses would rely on a very good framework to make sure that IT services are integrated to be utilized by them. And that's what they want to achieve by service management. They want to make sure that whatever services they are using for enabling a business, these services are very well managed, deliver required outputs, and also ensure that the value, or the ROI is generated, ROI is return on investment, is generated for every investment that is made in technology by the business. So that is the core understanding we have to have before assessing where service integration and management lies and where the other frameworks lie. um, we we now understand that IT is running the businesses, but we also understand that businesses need something to run or to use that IT framework in a much constructive manner. Saying that, service integration and management is not just confined to IT. It can be used to expand the horizon of services. We'll see about, or we'll check, we'll have a look at it in a later slide. So this is what we understand, but what is the problem? As businesses face challenges, and the current challenge being COVID, right? We are, as business, the market changes really fast, and so does the technology landscape. There is innovation in technology. There is so much going on in technology space. You all must have heard about the Moore's law, right? It talks about how the compute power of the world is increasing, and that's where our reliance on technology is increasing day by day. We are crunching data from everywhere. We are gathering data from everywhere, and we want to manage the data and use it to benefit the businesses in the best possible manner. Now, businesses have their own challenge. They are made, or they are built to cater to services which are not typically IT or infrastructure, information technology. So they use that data, they use the technology to enable those services. So or services or products. It can be products or services both, right? So fast changing technology landscape, fast changing market dynamics, situations like these which we are in today, they call for businesses to shy or remove their risk component. And removing that risk component would mean that even if it is a technology landscape changing, or it's market dynamics changing, or circumstances like this happening, like COVID happening, businesses should be able to run and do their or what should you say, do their part in the world as they're bound to do, or as they're meant to do. So SIAM is such a framework which would help in there. We'll see how it does. Then the second confusion comes in that there are so many frameworks, right? It's not just one framework like service integration management. There's ITL, there is IT for IT, there is various there's so many frameworks. Being a service provider or being a business, what should I choose for myself? We'll talk about it. I think the differentiation is very clear between what we can do with service integration and management and what we can do with other frameworks. And we'll talk about it. And also, there is not, I mean, given the frameworks market, right? We do not have a very clear visibility on how they integrate with each other. Though we know where they get used, and I think being a professional, we struggle with how we can integrate, say, IT for IT with service integration and management. So we'll talk about that as well. And as I said before, right, businesses struggle to get the return on investment on the investment they're making on technology. So there is no clear measure for business value generated by these as a whole, right? They do not get very clear understanding. So in my experience, I usually work for customers across the globe. The challenge we face nowadays when we get into a requirements phase with a customer, they say, you have to show me how this whole thing that you're trying to bring for me is creating value for me. And that's where frameworks have to play an important role in terms of justifying themselves as well. And we'll see how service integration management justifies itself. So as I said, right, there is a lot of expectation from the customer. So what do customers actually look for nowadays? Sorry, just flip the slide unintentionally. Okay, so what do customers look for now? Say they look for how service management can ease their technology adoption, which we discussed. How can they reduce people intensive governance organization? And that is, I think, most of us who are into service management space feel. Customers now say that I do not want to rely on people, given COVID, right? As we move ahead in the post-COVID world, this question would become more relevant. Businesses would say, people relying organizations or people relying models would not be very beneficial for me, because wherever possible, there should be automation be brought in, there should be artificial intelligence brought in, and I should be less people heavy. But still, we would be able to understand that how people would be needed in the organization. Maybe the mode of their work, uh, mode of their communication to the business would change, but still people would be needed for those organizations. Still, we have to understand how we can reduce the number of people in a governance organization. How can IT service providers play their role in technology journeys efficiently and effectively? Now, obviously, this is the most obvious question we face. Most of the requirements that we have from businesses, they are in terms of taking them to the next generation of technology. Whether it's adopting cloud, whether it's moving to SaaS platforms, PaaS platforms, or it's relating to utilizing AI ML into their business processes. So customers ask for how you would be able to do that. And as I said in the beginning, right, not one IT supplier can fulfill all the expectations that a business might have, given there are so many technology areas to look at. So there we kind of understand that there is a need of something in between which can help the customer fulfill that. And customer asks how they ensure that user experience, given that they have millennials as employees. So they need to have uh, a very clear view of interacting. They want to get a very clear view of how services would interact with people who are born in the generation of mobiles and tablets, who are born in the generation of social media. So there is a technology enablement component, and then there is a component which talks about how we make sure that technology gets adopted. In both the areas, we need businesses may not have an expertise, and businesses would need IT service providers or consultants or frameworks to help them. So this is what customers look for, and service integration management plays a very important role in delivering all these. So we'll see how. So again, a statement, right? A single line statement which says digital success is all about achieving optimum levels of integration. Now it's a simple sentence, but it means a lot. You cannot have over integrated or overcooked ecosystems, or you cannot have less integrated systems. We must have heard about watermelon effects. If we have technology providers or we have service providers, if they are loosely integrated, you will have things like watermelon effect. If they are too integrated, they would have operational redundancies. The cost would be very high for operations, and there would be numerous problems. So digital success is all about achieving optimum levels of integration. And if we leave that to the suppliers or the service providers, then the challenge becomes grave, because each service provider or a supplier would have a agenda to play, would have a role to play in that organization, and they would like to, being in business of providing services, they would like to increase their footprint. And that's where it could either lead to an overlapping technology landscape, or it can lead to a very loosely integrated system. So we require a framework, or we require a, a method to ensure that every integration that business needs to run successfully is either it's balanced in every sense. And that balance, I think, is brought in by a framework like SIAM, Service Integration and Management. So what is SIAM in essence, right? Service Integration Management in essence. So you see, I mean, it's a simple diagram. I'll take you through it step by step. There is a strategy that runs or strategy that makes sure that business is moving in the right direction for any business. Now that strategy is now fueled by a word called digital, which means cloud, IoT, AI, ML, everything that you can think about, social media, everything you can think about. That strategy, when it gets filled by this phenomena called digital, they kind of try to run that business more enabled by digital. And for that, they would require a set of services or IT services which would be provided by IT service providers to make sure that these whatever is there, whatever is in the head of that strategy to run the business gets fulfilled over a period of time, or in a fast-paced manner, I would say. So they have to create a layer that governs this overall system of getting inputs from strategy, and making sure that whatever thought is provided by strategy, it's getting converted to more tangible or more realistic outputs. So there has to be a governance setup. Now, when this governance is set up and when it starts getting inputs from strategy, and we understand that there would be a number of suppliers to that, we would require a sort of engine to make sure that everything is getting integrated. And that's where, if you see the green part, right, the integration, where the actual integration for services from all the suppliers takes place in this area. This is where the SIAM's operations and this is where all the supplier services are merged together to provide a unified view. This takes care of consumption, this has to take care of consumption, this has to take care of right operations, this has to take care of ensuring that technology is integrated well, people are integrated well, processes are integrated well. And that is where the integration part kicks in. And obviously when they all are integrated, they provide a unified IT services. Now, these unified IT services, as we discussed in the beginning, are majorly enabling the business services. So once the business services get enabled, the unified IT services are doing their job in the best possible manner. But we have to make sure that whatever business services are running, they are also providing right inputs for strategy and integration as well. So we have to understand, we have to provision for a feedback channel, a feedback mechanism which runs between services, business services, IT services, integration and strategy. So that you see from in form of that gray pipe network at the bottom. So this is how SIAM would interact, and this whole thing makes up the SIAM. Strategy, which is technology strategy, gets filled with business demands, the newish technology advancements. We provide governance to make sure that this strategy gets converted to tangible outputs for the business. Then we integrate the services from suppliers, and as we integrate, the IT services start enabling the business services. And we have to ensure that there is right feedback flowing from all these areas back to strategy, integration, IT service providers to ensure that their services are improving and innovating over a period of time. So if we understand that we have to achieve an optimum level of integration, we require framework like these, or we require a setup like this to ensure this is happening. And SIAM provides us precisely the same thing. Now, SIAM is not the only one in the market, we understand. Besides SIAM, we've got ITL, we've got VeriSM, TOGAF, IT for IT, and ISO 20000. And there are numerous frameworks. So how do they confuse us? Yes, they confuse us. We kind of somehow have to understand, if SIAM is existing, how do I bring in ITL? And if ITL is there, how do I bring in VeriSM? And if VeriSM is there, I still need to get a TOGAF certification, or where would my TOGAF expertise go? So in the subsequent slides, I'll tell you how to simply understand this whole thing. But the idea is that SIAM is cross business. SIAM is not restricted to just technology. It can be from IT service providers to HR providers to finance service providers. It can apply to anyone. And that's where the real value of SIAM lies. And that's where SIAM serves as an overarching framework. Everything else has a specific role to play. For instance, ITL is specifically meant for managing IT services. Now, definitely SIAM can utilize ITL to ensure that IT service providers are catering to all these services being provided. But still, SIAM has a bigger role to play than just ITL. Similarly, VeriSM can be utilized to ensure that whatever next generation we are talking about, are the service providers or the suppliers doing it in the right way? SIAM would ensure that VeriSM gets utilized by the service providers. Similarly, IT for IT and ISO 20000. TOGAF is a different kind of framework. It's for enterprise architecture. It gets utilized for enterprise as such. It's not just technology restricted, it's for a wider usage as well, but that's for the designing and architecting the overall enterprise. So we see that there are a large number of frameworks, but if we simply understand that how business operates, what all business needs, probably we'll have a simpler view. And this slide gives a thought process on how they usually are built. So as I said, right, SIAM works for business. SIAM is a component of business because it's the layer that integrates all the service providers underlying it, while rest of the frameworks, right, rest of the methods, frameworks, models, they kind of contribute to one or more of the other areas. So if I talk about IT infrastructure, if we talk about three major suppliers in, I'm just taking example of these three, but there can be 50 kind of suppliers for an organization. If we talk about major three, IT infrastructure management, application development, and HR and finances, we'll see that cloud management frameworks would sit between application development and IT infrastructure. ISO 20K would again sit in the same area. DevOps would be more towards application development, less towards IT infrastructure. TOGAF would be an enterprise-wide architecting framework. Again, SIAM and ITL would fall into application development and IT infrastructure. But SIAM is the framework that would sit with the business to ensure that the business strategy is getting passed on to IT suppliers or non-IT suppliers, and at the end of the day, they all are delivering the right inputs required by the business. So the place for SIAM is very different compared to the place for other frameworks and methods. I know people may argue that you can place ITL or you can place other frameworks at the business level as well, but then again, these are debatable. We can debate further on that. But the idea is SIAM is that enterprise-wide service management concept, which any business would need to ensure that the various suppliers underlying it are delivering the right outputs for the business. So the key takeaway from this slide, and I think I just mentioned it to most of the professionals I interact with, that SIAM is the framework that is built to work on the business side. It can never work on a supplier side. So even though we see that there are 4 different ways in which SIAM can be deployed, the idea of that deployment has to be that whatever we are creating as SIAM has to work for the business. It cannot work for the service providers, and that's where its main value stays. So saying that, I'll just move to the next slide, which shows a very simplified table that I put together to give you a view on how these concepts interoperate. Now, these are not hard code interoperability. This is not hard code interoperability. It just gives you a view on how various areas of or various frameworks and models interact with each other. So you'll see that SIAM kind of is capable of operating with all these service management frameworks, models, and methods. And you'll see that some of them operate with each other very well. Some of them are not so friendly. I usually see a conflict between DevOps and ITL whenever we have to work with both the frameworks in businesses. Similarly, DevOps and TOGAF, they go very together very well. ISO 20K and DevOps, so not very closely, because ISO 20K is very much aligned to what ITIL prescribes. So just keep a view on this table, and you'll realize that SIAM is a framework that is applicable cross methods, cross frameworks, and cross models. So it can be utilized for any kind of business, no matter what kind of underlying framework is. Now, how do we choose the right framework? I mean, we discussed that SIAM is an overarching framework, but besides the SIAM, there you would need to choose a right framework for making your services or making a part of your business successful. Now we have to understand very clearly that what role we are playing in the business. Are we just an individual supplier, or we are providing a set of services which are enabled by multiple suppliers under us? So that can help us very well understand what kind of framework we should adopt. So if we are a large supplier and we also rely on suppliers to provide services to a business, then obviously a framework of like SIAM would make sense for us as well. But if we are a technology service provider which is focused on next generation technologies, obviously we adopt various things for ourselves and prescribe a SIAM like framework for business who would have more suppliers like us. So so the role in a business, in the overall business, is very important to understand what kind of framework we want to propose. Also, we have to understand what kind of uh, needs customer has. We have to understand that customers in US and Europe respond differently to frameworks like ITL or frameworks like cloud management platforms or cloud management frameworks. Europe. I mean, that's my experience in Europe. Culturally, they are more process oriented, while in US culturally they are more technology oriented. So frameworks like VariSM could very well go in countries like US, but frameworks like ITL, IT for IT would very well go in European regions. Then intellectual alignment, I mean, that goes with the cultural alignment as well. Technology oriented businesses are more keen to adopt technology frameworks rather than typical governance frameworks. And similarly, as I said, geographical alignments in the US and UK example. So we have to assess customer needs. We have to assess what is their current thought process in terms of frameworks and methods, and we can prescribe a right framework for them and use for them. Obviously, we have to check interoperability. We can prescribe more than one framework for any business need, but then whether they would be conflicting over a period of time, we have to understand that. We do not want to create contradictions into the overall services landscape, which we want to avoid. And we have to keep validating the need of update or upgrade the integration. All the frameworks are evolving over a period of time, and so does service integration and management. So maybe there, so for instance, ITL4 brought in components of service integration into it, which were previously not there in ITL 2011. So even though ITL4 talks about service integration, the overarching service integration and management still remains a separate discipline. So we have to keep on validating in a services landscape how the frameworks are evolving, what are their nuances, what has changed, what new they are bringing. I think from my experience, I think they're converging. They want to converge with their own different flavor within them. But yes, still till that point there are no contradictions to other frameworks. We cannot use them together. We have to be very careful in choosing the right framework for the business. So we have to, this is a typical step-by-step, what should I say, method we can use to get the right framework for the business. That is what we need. So with that, if you have got any questions, you can pass those questions to us through chat window. And now I'll hand over to Namrata to take you through the actual certification schemes for SIAM through EXIN. Namrata, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Rakesh, for this wonderful session in SIAM and choosing the right framework. Well, I'll take few more minutes to showcase the EXIN SIAM qualifications. So we can move to the next slide. And the next one, yeah. So we have two level of certification: foundation and professional. With foundation qualified, you will be able to understand the main concepts and processes of SIAM that are used in organizations, establish a SIAM ecosystem in order to better organize the organizational resources, provide better support during a SIAM implementation by understanding the main considerations for most of the important processes, reduce risk associated with integrated services and the SIAM ecosystem, integrate services by using different structures based on SIAM practices and methodology, and many more. While with the professional qualified, you will be able to establish a governance framework based on SIAM practices, perform an organization assessment to better determine and establish a plan and promote improvements, determine the key elements to perform a SIAM implementation, select different approaches to implement SIAM, lead a SIAM implementation, and so on. So with the next slide, we also have SIAM mapped into one of the career path certification, and that is Agile Service Manager. So Agile Service Manager is one of the career path certifications out of other available 10 other career path certifications, and SIAM over here in Agile Service Manager has been mapped into one of this. So Agile Service Managers can become an essential link between operational and development teams, and therefore are essential in making DevOps and Agile work in organizations. In the next slide, if we can move. Um, yeah, so how do you get this Agile Service Manager certificate? Now you need to have or you can achieve the same having three certifications combinedly. One is Agile Scrum Foundation, SIAM Foundation, and VeriSim Professional. I'll not go into the detail of it, but then we are open to questions, and also you can get back to us with any questions related to certification or learning or training, either to Consuldesk or EXIN, and we are more than happy to help you with. With that, I'll proceed answering the questions coming from our audience. So, Rakesh, the first question is they have asked difference among service provider, supplier, and vendor.
Okay. So, I mean, I think we have to understand where exactly is this question placed, right? So, if there is uh, in a typical large business, that deploys SIAM, service providers should be the strategic suppliers. Sorry, suppliers should be strategic suppliers, which would mean that they are taking care of big chunks of services underlying them. So there could be a supplier for total IT services. There could be a supplier for application development. There could be a supplier for end user experience. Now, that is, I mean, that is where the suppliers get fit, if we understand it from SIAM methodology. Now, vendors are the service providers that these suppliers use within themselves, or there are some vendors which do not interact with with the business directly in terms of providing business or providing enablement to business services. So there could be a vendor who provides backup services for data center, or there could be a vendor who manages the network, or let's say manages the fiber channel for the network provided. So these are vendors who are either working under a typical service provider, which is behaving as a supplier in SIAM. So vendor and supplier are I mean, that's how it's usually differentiated. Uh, a service provider, it's a generic term. It can be used for supplier as well as vendor, because both of them are providing services. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Rakesh. The next question is if we are enabling service management to extend horizon to business services, are we saying that business service management is obsolete, or how does the demarcation goes?
No, I don't think they get obsolete. I think they get converged. So as we're seeing, right, most of the businesses are technology based, technology oriented. I mean, I'm not saying not all of them, but quite. And after COVID, I think a lot of businesses who were working traditionally or conventionally would also move to IT way of working. So they'll converge. Maybe after a while, you will start seeing the business processes being typically technical technology processes. But at this moment, we are designing, or we are defining that line between business process and technology process, just to simplify the overall landscape. There are experts for typical vertical, typical domain, like finance, from life sciences, manufacturing. They kind of work very closely with IT business processes, IT processes, and drive their business processes. But soon you will see that diminish. That will diminish, and we'll have what you say, converged view of business processes and IT processes.
Thank you. The next question is, if SIAM is managed by a supplier organization, now to integrate or onboard other suppliers to SIAM, do we have a contract or kind of MOU, as SIAM would have their own KPI SLA? So in order to achieve, we need to have some kind of agreement.
Yes, that's correct. Industry calls it a collaboration agreement. I think that is required for that for all the suppliers to sign that, saying that if a service provider is behaving as SIAM provider, the model has to be hybrid in nature, which includes good participation from the business also. Otherwise, it would be very challenging. Otherwise, suppliers would not agree to the terms of collaboration agreement. So once the business has a good participation, business drives that signing of collaboration agreements, business drives the creation of terms of those collaboration agreement, and then SIAM's role is simplified to get that enable or get alignment to that collaboration agreement. So yes, there is an agreement called collaboration agreement that everyone needs to sign.
Right. So next is, would it be good for person managing SIAM with limited knowledge for application or infrastructure to go for TOGAF?
As I said, that TOGAF, yes, it makes sense, right? You can go for TOGAF. In fact, TOGAF is a framework to design the overall enterprise. How you want to make it technology enabled, how you want to make sure that the various other business functions are aligned and enabled through technology. That's what TOGAF talks about. And if you remember the small diagram I showed, right? TOGAF operates cross towers. Its main purpose is not to let's say its main purpose is to make sure that overall enterprise is designed in the most productive manner, and it provides all the right components for it. But it does not necessarily mean that you have to be an expert in technology or application or IT service, infrastructure or application knowledge. You don't need to be an expert in any of these.
Thank you, Rakesh. I hope. Sorry. Yeah, please.
I was saying that
Yes, sir.
the
Yeah.
role of TOGAF is slightly different from conventional ITIL or various SIAM framework, right? TOGAF is for designing an overall enterprise.
Right, right. Thank you, Rakesh. I hope, Ashima, that answers your question. We have one more question. Can we go for professional certification directly without appearing for foundation? Well, I'll take that up.
Yeah.
Well, for professional certification, training is mandate, while for foundation it is not. However, foundation is not mandate for professional, though it is recommended. So you can always go through the foundation qualification first, and then you can go for professional. But if you in case having a lot of experience already and you want to go with a professional directly, that's also possible. It's not mandate. Foundation is not a mandate for professional. With that, we proceed with the next question. That is, what should be a good financial justification to deploy or provide a framework for services?
Okay, so if I think it's one of the key things that customers also ask us, right? The justification is simplification of their overall operating model. When they interact, or when the business has to interact with a lot of suppliers, they have to make their own team very heavy. And that team usually is not sometimes not usually, but sometimes not very versed with the way how to interact with suppliers, or how to interact with technology suppliers who are expert. Most of the times they do not have an expertise in integrating those services, which leads to a lot of wastage in terms of projects, in terms of programs, in terms of delivery. Also, business is not where, I mean, usually not very good at driving innovation or deriving innovation. Not say, let's not say driving, but deriving innovation from the various suppliers. All the suppliers would run their CSI program, but how would you derive an innovation that can make your business a next generation business over a period of time? So to make sure that you have benefits like innovation, operational efficiency, uh, you remove wastages from delivery, all these are cost and time and cost, right? So these all benefits would be accrued when you deploy something like service integration and management. That would help in simplifying the overall services landscape for the customer, and the customer would have to just provide instructions what he wants from the suppliers, and SIAM would have to, or would have the responsibility to deliver that.
Right. Rakesh, there is a question from Ajit. Can you clarify your comment where it was mentioned SIAM will work for business and not for supplies?
Exactly. Okay, that's an interesting question, and that's a valid one. I've come across this question very often, and most of the times the service providers, like the industry best service providers who provide IT services to all big businesses of the world, when they deploy service integration and management, they deploy in a model where they are either the lead supplier or they are the SIAM provider. Now, um, the fundamental difference between a typical IT service management or service management office and a SIAM office is that service management office is used to manage the services for incident problem changes for a particular service provider, or it can be used to manage for a couple of service providers using the supplier management function. But still, it would talk the language uh, of a service provider. It would still talk about the SLA that are governed or that are run, SLAs that govern the services of that service provider. While on the other hand, SIAM has accountability towards the business. SIAM does not care which service provider is underlying. I mean, uh, this means that even though a service provider is creating the SIAM layer, it has to behave independently. It cannot be tied to the governance, or it cannot be tied to the hierarchy of an individual service provider. It has to be tied to the business governance, the governance of the business. Business has to be the strategy initiator there. Business has to be the one to provide inputs. The accountability lies for business. I think that's where we differentiate between a typical service management scenario and SIAM scenario. And this is a mistake we most of the times do. We create a SIAM layer, and that still aligns to the service provider, and that's where business loses control. And at the end of the day, we see things like watermelon effect. Business is unhappy, still all the SLAs are met. So we have to align SIAM to business. It should work for the business, not for the service provider. That's what I meant.
Thank you, Rakesh, on addressing that. So the next question is more on the certification. That is there a bridge course for 2019 SIAM certified professional? Well, Subhajit, the older version need not be, need not really go for the newer one, because more or less the older version also is valid. There are certain changes on the course content and the practical assignments and so on, but that doesn't make the older version invalid. So those who are already certified on the older version of professional or foundation, that remains valid. There's no need of really going for the newer versions. I hope that answers your question. We'll go to the next question, which is, what is your view on leveraging IT for SIAM ecosystem? How it will help running business of IT in multi supplier ecosystem? Rakesh, I think you need to address that.
Yeah, sure. So IT for I mean, wherever I've worked in a couple of opportunities where IT for IT was the core enabler for the IT operations. which is, I mean, I know IT for IT talks about strategy as well, but it is more towards technology operations. The main value for IT remains in technology operations. So if IT for IT is getting utilized, obviously it can be utilized as a framework under the overall service integration and management. Service integration management, as I said, right, it's not just with service integration management, it's with any other framework. It can adopt to any circumstance or scenario. If IT for IT is being utilized for a business, obviously we can shelve the methods or techniques provided by SIAM in lieu of IT for IT provided techniques and methods. So they are complementary. I'm not an expert in IT for IT, but yes, I've worked with both of them complementing each other, and they work very well.
I hope that answers your question, Ajit. We'll go to the next question. It is for SIAM implementation, what are all key things should be considered?
For SIAM implementation, I think for
Yeah.
any framework implementation, people things to be considered are people, process, and technology, right? So you have to consider from these three aspects. Obviously you need to have a set of people who would run as a function or run as uh, the governance for overall SIAM. This would include people for various process management roles. Then you would have to have processes that cut through suppliers. You cannot have conventional processes that are used to manage one single supplier scenarios. You would have to factor in things like collaboration agreements, which would be, I mean, which for me, it's a very first thing to be mandated for any SIAM engagement. And then obviously technology, you need to have a tool, service management tool, to ensure that the integrations that we talk about in processes, these are not just lying in paper. We have some integrations in terms of ticket flow. We have some integration in terms of CI information being passed from supplier to the parent CMDB. We also have information in terms of knowledge management, how knowledge is getting integrated from supplier to supplier, and how that is getting utilized for the overall business. Obviously the automation, if we are driving automation, then obviously automation has to run cross supplier. So it would be a combination of these three things: people, process, technology. And as we place the right elements into each of these, I think we'll be setting up a good service integration and management framework. Does
Thank
that
you,
answer your
Rakesh.
question?
I really hope that answers his question. So we go to the next question where it has
Yeah,
been
Namita,
asked,
please go ahead.
after SIAM has been implemented, how do you measure effectiveness of SIAM?
Where the previous question comes into the picture, right? Where we are placing SIAM. Okay, so and that's where the concept of watermelon effect comes into the picture as well, right? The effectiveness of SIAM is measured through KPIs, which are very cross supplier and cross services in nature. So you cannot have a problem management KPI, a simple problem management KPI, which is like reducing the number of major incidents or reduction in the number of incidents deployed for SIAM. You would have a specific KPI for SIAM. You would have a KPI like how many cross supplier incidents got reduced over a period of time, or how many tickets or in what percentage of ticket the number of hops got reduced over a period of time, how many conflicts got came into picture in a particular specific time, and how many of these got resolved in or how much time each of these incidents took to resolve, conflict took to resolve. So there would be a specific set of KPIs that are designed for SIAM. I mean, when we create a SIAM framework for a customer, we design those KPIs keeping in mind what customers' expectations are, and these KPIs are cross services in nature. So that would provide the right measurement of performance for SIAM.
Right. So the next one is, which is the best ITSM tool to date, where SIAM's capabilities are the optimum?
I don't think there is one, and that's a struggle for people like me as well, because we kind of architect solution for businesses. So if we, I mean, the industry leading tools are ServiceNow, BMC, Micro Focus. I mean, Micro Focus is not usually BMC and Remedy. BMC and ServiceNow are the forerunners. Both of them lack a few things and have edge in specific areas over each other. But I would say when we create a tool strategy for service integration management, we have to work with a combination of tools. For service integration management, a good monitoring tool or good monitoring tool ecosystem should be brought in, which can work in an integrated manner with the suppliers. Once that is being set up, and once you create a good line of sight from business services to the IT services components, I think 30 to 40% of your job is done. And then obviously any ticketing tool like ServiceNow or BMC provides us the right interlinking capabilities for processes. Processes can, or tickets can flow from one supplier to another. We can put the time being KPIs like time being spent by each group on each ticket, things like those. And the other important aspect, which is reporting, which is required by SIAM very often. I think that requires specialized tools. I don't think BMC or ServiceNow provide a very good reporting capability for cross supplier scenarios. If they are sitting in various, I mean, if all the suppliers on different ITSM tools as such. So we might have to work with some other tools like I mean, there are numerous reporting tools in the market, so you can choose tools to extract data and crunch the data and make sure that right metrics are derived for businesses to use. So you have to work with a combination of tools, and that's what we do as well.
Right. I hope that answers Prem's question. Also, the additional question, which is more on the service now. So I think that answers both the questions. Considering the time factor, we'll go and we will address the last question for this session. So there is a question: with ITIL 4, DevOps is now integrated. Your views on it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I said, right, all the frameworks are evolving. DevOps is a futuristic framework where infrastructure is going to be taken up as code. So I think ITIL 4 makes a very good framework for, I mean, if you see, remember the diagram as well, right? I placed ITIL as application development management as well as infrastructure uh, for both of them. So it works very well, and ITIL 4 is a very capable framework to address needs from application development as well as infrastructure side. And integration with DevOps makes it more business centric.
Right. With that, thank you, Rakesh, so much for addressing all the questions. I hope really that answers to all the questions of the attendees, those who are here. Thank you all for joining us today. And please stay tuned for upcoming learning sessions similar to SIAM and other sessions on different topics. And have a good day. Please feel free to drop us more questions to our email IDs mentioned in the slide, and also that we will make this presentation available to all of you. Also, there might be some of the promotion on the training side and so on, that also will be sent to all of you for your perusal. Thank you so much and have a good day. Thank you, Rakesh, for joining us today.
Thank you,
Yep.
Namrata.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye bye. Take care.